Welcome to the final session. In this session, we're going to be learning about all these things. It's going to be the computational lens on the sciences, computational and mathematical questions that are motivated by all these applications. So the first paper is a complexity trichotomy for K-regular asymmetric spin systems using number theory by Jinyi Tsai, Ziguo Fu, Kurt Gerstner, and Michael Kowalczyk. So the paper starts with a puzzle, which is the following. Suppose that you have two angles, phi and psi. I always forget the names of the Greek letters, but are two angles that satisfy tangent of phi equals twice tangent of psi, which is positive. And the question is it possible that both phi and psi are rational multiples of pi? This is not an easy puzzle, okay? Well, it turns out the amazing fact is that the answer to this puzzle is the crucial ingredient in classifying the computational complexity of spin systems on K-regular graphs. So what is it they're interested in here? First of all, what's a spin system? So you have a graph, you assign to each vertex in the graph a Boolean value, its spin up or down, and then this induces local interactions across the edges. So, and the partition function for such a spin system is the sum over all Boolean assignments to the vertices of the product of the strength of the local interactions. And this is a really important quantity in statistical physics. And so the question is to either compute it or approximate it or something like that. And using this cute number theoretic fact with a very non-trivial proof, they're able to establish a trichotomy for such problems. Okay, the second talk is Limits for Rumor Spreading in Stochastic Populations by Lukas Bukowski, Ofer Feinerman, Amos Korman, and Emmanuel Natal. So this is a problem that these ants face. So these are some desert ants. So suppose such an ant goes out wandering in the desert and discovers a cricket. I think that's a cricket, I'm not sure. And basically wants to come back to the nest and get some help to bring the cricket back. So unfortunately, ants can't talk. So when the ant gets back, it has to somehow communicate and get the other ants to come. And the way these ants communicate, oddly, is by bumping into each other, somehow. And it's not clear that this is a very effective way to either tell someone something or hear something because they really can't tell whether you're bumping into them by accident or not. So the paper kind of addresses this kind of question. What's the impact of noise in communication on the ability of biological systems to share and collectively process information? And the paper proves a nice lower bound on the time it takes to spread a rumor in a communication model inspired by these ants. Okay, the third paper is Towards a Theory of Markov Influence Systems and Their Renormalization by Bernard Chazelle. And what Bernard is looking at is something called Markov influence systems. So we all know Markov chains. So here you have a sequence of Markov chains that are changing over time. And how do they change? Well, depending on the current distribution over the current state, that determines what the current transition probabilities are. Okay, so this is used to model these kinds of things, like birds flocking and protein-protein networks and traffic and so on. So it's a very complicated dynamical system that where the current transition probabilities depend on the current distribution over the states. So how do you analyze such a complicated beast? I mean, this is, who knows? I mean, I don't understand the paper. But, basically, he uses a technique. The simplest form of this technique is something we all know and love from basic Markov chains, which is we all know that we can classify the states in a Markov chain according to whether they're transient or whether they're in an irreducible component or so on. And once we're in an irreducible component, we know that starting there, there'll be a stationary distribution. So this is a special case of a technique called renormalization that he uses in this much more complicated context to tame the beast, so to speak. Okay, and the final talk of the session is Learning Dynamics and the Coevolution of Competing Sexual Species by Georgios Palouris and Leonard Schulman. Okay, so this continues an exciting line of research on the algorithmic power of the evolutionary process that's happened recently. So there, for example, were some recent papers where they defined some evolutionary dynamics based on multiplicative weight update, and they analyzed the convergence of such systems. And these are really nice results, but one of the unfortunate facts is that the convergence is to a world with no diversity. And so maybe it's not a good explanation of evolution. So this paper attempts to incorporate other evolutionary pressures into the model to understand, evolution and the algorithmic power of evolutionary processes. So in particular, what they're interested in is the co-evolution between species. So for example, a hummingbird benefits from the flower and the flower benefits from the hummingbird. How does this affect the beak length of the hummingbird? So this is a very favorable interaction. This paper is about unfavorable interactions. So they are basically studying the dynamics of sexual species in highly competitive or, adversarial type relationships. And they have a neat way of modeling this. They model it game theoretically as the two species, which are each corresponds to a team competing for survival. And the members of a team are the genes of a particular species. The players on the team have independent randomness, but a common payoff because they're working together for the good of the species. And basically what they then do is understand how is the evolution of each of these and this constant competition affecting their long-term outcomes under these under a set of learning dynamics that they define here. So they get some really interesting outcomes from that. So without further ado, I will let you call up the first speaker.